We're streaming these discussions live to Danske Bank's social media channels. Welcome to you as well. Our first guest just finished his presentation on the main stage a couple of minutes ago. Please welcome Mr. Cillian Leonowicz, Senior Manager Consulting from Deloitte.
Thank you. Thank you. Oops. That's working. Perfect.
Now it's working.
Hey.
Cillian, welcome to the Hub stage. Pleasure having you here. Your topic, as we just heard, is blockchain.
Yep, correct.
As our audience hasn't had a chance to ask questions before with your 20-minute time slot here, I'm encouraging you guys to have them right now. Just raise your hand, we will give you a microphone, and you will have a chance to ask these questions that you actually want to ask. Meanwhile, let's get started with some topics you touched earlier today. I have an easy question for you as a starters. Let's begin with the biggest challenges of blockchain development. What are the roadblocks to prevention? What is keeping us back? A lot of talk, so little happening.
Yeah, so I think there's a number of things. As we mentioned in the presentation, I think there's a lot of challenges in terms of standards, in terms of putting this into production, in terms of what it actually takes to get it there. People just don't know. I think also in general there's a lot of people trying to find problems for blockchain as opposed to actually looking at, well, what's my future business? Where does it need to go? What should I be doing strategically? And then actually how does blockchain fit into that environment, as opposed to we need a blockchain solution for something. That comes down to education as well. But I think it's a lot of things. You know, there's standards is definitely one, and also regulator acceptance. You know, will the regulators accept a blockchain, or will they say no, we don't believe in the technology? Interestingly, we've seen diverse opinions across Europe. One of the most interesting opinions has been by the regulator in Germany. And they've said, same business, same risk, irrespective of technology. You just need to manage your risk in your business.
You're an expert. You want to do these deep dives. I'm a simple guy. I need a simple answer. So pick one.
For me, standards.
Standards. What should be done?
What should be done? I think that's going to be a couple of things. I think one is we need the protocol standards. They are being reviewed today. Australia Standards Authority has kicked off a study. They've made that a global study now. I think that's the first one. I think secondly, the banks need to start working and collaborating more to understand exactly what it is they want to share and how they want to share information between them.
I have noticed, just a guesstimate based on the number of black suits on this building right now, that we might have a lot of bankers here. And if I learned anything about banking, one thing is for sure, that people are pondering, how do we benefit from this? So what are the new business models that should be developed on a banking industry to really utilize the blockchain?
It's a great question. What is the future of a bank? It could be bleak days for some people, I'm afraid. You know, it's interesting. We were asked by a Spanish client last week to develop an assessment for their business of how they could repatriate funds from their subsidiaries in Latin America and in Africa. So they said, well, you know, should we be using traditional payment channels? Should we be looking at, you know, SWIFT and SEPA and all that sort of stuff? Or is there PSD2 capability? So we thought about it and we said to them, well, why don't you just use Bitcoin? In that instance, no bank is required. So what is the future banking model? I think what banks will need to do is they'll need to disrupt themselves. They've got to think about actually what are the services I offer? How do I open up my banking application layers, my APIs, whether it's through PSD2, whether it's through blockchain, and actually start generating new revenue models. And maybe in that instance, it's actually just paying people on a transaction basis, or paying them to join the platform because it's a safe wallet for blockchain, or for a Bitcoin, or for an Ether coin, or whatever it is. Or maybe they create their own cryptocurrencies. Who knows? The key point is they're going to have to be flexible. I think we're too early, though, to tell as to what the secret recipe is. If I knew the secret sauce, I'd be eating it myself. I wouldn't be standing here.
And not being here talking with me about this. Any questions from the audience? Not at the moment. You had a bold statement on the main stage. Do you dare to repeat it for our audience and streaming audience?
The statement is quite simple. Will the bank of the future have a balance sheet? Great question. You know, if we look at all the other industries, all the disintermediation that's happening, will the bank have a balance sheet? Will it be a peer-to-peer mechanism, a platform which just facilitates people sharing money or capital? So, for example, there's 400 people here today. Let's just say each of those 400 people put up €1,000 into a blockchain, and let's just say I needed to buy a house and it was going to cost €400,000, and everybody in the room agreed to lend me that money. Well, on the blockchain we could facilitate that. We could do that today. Yeah. Do I need a mortgage? If I had a smart contract in the background that ran and said, I will give each of the people a compound interest rate of 3.3%, which would be more than your savings account, would you give me €1,000? Maybe, right? So that's where that's kind of how it's going to change the game, I guess.
And one interesting question concerning blockchain is whether we are talking about closed or open systems.
Yeah.
Do you have any insights on that?
I do. So at the moment, the best examples are the open systems, the Bitcoin blockchain and the Ethereum blockchain. The challenge is that people get a little bit scared by some of the concepts, particularly when they think about money laundering, when they think about some of the dark web activity. So people get a little bit concerned. In reality, the banks are moving the other way. They're trying to create these private networks. Effectively, what they're trying to do is remediate. So they're being disintermediated. So how do we react? Well, we try to remediate. Okay, and it makes sense. Like psychologically and intelligently or intellectually, it makes sense. The challenge is that actually you don't get a lot of the benefits that you get with a traditional blockchain. So the biggest blockchain benefit of the Bitcoin blockchain is there's 10,000 odd nodes. Very, very difficult to take over the system, very difficult to hack it. Why? Because there's 10,000 replicated versions of the database running a consensus mechanism. In a smaller private version, you don't get as strong a safety. What I think will be the model going forward is banks or people within a value chain will interact in a private blockchain. End-of-day positions will then be put into a public blockchain. And maybe they'll just be encrypted, but at least there'll be this immutable safety record within the big clunky blockchains, safe ones.
One more question from banking perspective. As an amateur, one of the key questions that I have is that whether banks have the knowledge and the skill sets internally needed to actually do what you're describing we should do here.
Yes and no. Certain technologies and skills can be learned. A lot of the coding is, Python, Django. Can it be trained and can people relearn it within the banking setting? Yes. There are other things, though, that are quite difficult. So, for example, to write Ethereum smart contracts, that's a very limited set of skills today that's available in the world. Very, very low. So that's difficult. But I think that's where it's going to be down to firms to actually engage and embrace the ecosystem. Say, right, we have this set of skills, we need to upskill, and that's fine. But also, we don't have these skills and we need to go to a startup or we need to just participate actively in the ecosystem. I think it's going to be that process.
As we don't have any questions, I think that we have used our time. Thank you, Cillian, for sharing your ideas, your insights here. And thanks for the audience from here and online. We will be continuing 12:30 from the hub stage. Thank you.
Thank you.